Hi everyone, in this video we are going to very briefly review dimensional analysis. So up until this point, I fully expect that you can comfortably transition from something in grams to moles to molecules or even atoms, okay? And then I also expect for you to be able to go from molecules and atoms to moles and then from moles to grams. I definitely expect that you should be able to go from grams to molecules and atoms and then back and forth. But please note, you need to go through moles. You absolutely have to go through moles. So you cannot go directly from grams to molecules or from molecules to grams. So let's review one problem really quickly before we move on. So the first thing I want to do together, how many atoms are in 12 grams of carbon? Okay, so we're going to do this together. First thing you need to do is start off with what you know. And so whenever I say start off with what you know, what I mean is start off with something that is very specific to this problem. So we know physically that we have 12 grams of carbon, and we want to know how many atoms are in exactly 12 grams. So start off with what you know. We know we have 12 grams of carbon. We're in grams, so the only thing we can do is go to moles right now. Grams of carbon is on the top, so grams of carbon must be at the bottom, and then we're trying to get to moles of carbon. So we know that we can use the atomic mass of our carbon to get to moles. So we know there are 12.01 grams of carbon in every 1 mole of carbon. Now, we're in moles. All we have to do is one more step in order to go from 2 atoms. So now we know for every 1 mole of carbon, there are 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd atoms. And again, we're talking about carbon specifically. So check our units. Grams of carbon, that cancels out. Moles of carbon, that cancels out. And we're left with atoms of carbon at the top. Well, we have 12 essentially divided by 12, so we're left over with the answer 6.02 times 10 to the 23 carbon atoms. So, how many atoms are in 12 grams of carbon? 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd carbon atoms. You need to realize and get very comfortable with going from grams to moles to atoms and then backwards. So now you try one really quickly before we make this incredibly challenging. All right, here's the question. How many grams of carbon are in 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd molecules of carbon dioxide? Go. All right, did you get an answer? Hopefully you did. Just in case you didn't, we're going to work through this together really quickly. So you start off with what you know. The only thing we know is that we have 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd molecules of carbon dioxide. So we have molecules of carbon dioxide in the top. We need to put molecules of CO2 on the bottom. We know the only way we can go from molecules is to moles of CO2. We know for every 1 mole of CO2, we have 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd molecules of CO2. Avogadro's number. All right, so we're in moles of CO2. We're trying to get to grams of carbon. So what I'm going to do now is convert from moles of carbon dioxide to moles of carbon. So for every 1 mole of CO2, I have 1 mole of carbon. So what I'm saying is there's 1 carbon in every 1 mole of CO2, okay? So now, for every 1 mole of carbon, we have 12.01 grams of carbon. So we went from molecules of carbon dioxide to grams of carbon. So now let's check our units. Molecules of CO2 on top, molecules of CO2 on the bottom. Moles of CO2, moles of CO2, moles of C. We're left over with just grams of carbon. If we calculate this out, we get something like 12.01 grams of carbon. You should hopefully be able to see that because 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd, and you just divide that out, and we're left with the same number. Okay, this was a review. This was meant to be easy. If this is not easy, you need to stop right now because the next video is going to be too challenging for you. Good luck. Take care of yourself. Drink water.